Welcome back to lesson 5. This week it is permission to dream again. Now we've covered a lot here over the past month, and you checked whether your goals were actually yours. You found a few rules you've been treating as facts. You wrote a new identity statement and gave it a small piece of proof, and you started training your filter to notice evidence instead of letting it run on autopilot. Now today we're going to close off the past month, and I want to do it with the one thing that actually moves people from understanding all of this to doing something with it. An honest look at the gap between where you are right now and where you actually want to be. So here's the question. If nothing in your life changed from this point forward, not your habits, not your income, and not the relationship you keep needing to address, would you actually be okay with that in 5 years? I want you to really answer that, not just read past it. Now have everything ready from earlier lessons nearby, because we're going to bring it all together. In 1975, an engineer at Kodak named Steven Sasson built the world's first working digital camera. He brought it to the company executives who watched it work and were reportedly unimpressed. One well-documented response at that time was something close to, "That's cute, but don't tell anyone about it." Kodak's entire business was built on film, and film was extraordinarily profitable. Confronting what digital photography meant for the business would have meant facing a gap that most of the company didn't want to look at directly. So they didn't. For decades, Kodak kept investing in the comfortable, profitable present instead of the uncomfortable, inevitable future of their own engineer had already built a working prototype of. They had the technology before almost anyone else on Earth. What they didn't have was the willingness to look honestly at the contrast between where the business was heading and where it currently sat, because facing that gap meant admitting the thing that was working right now wasn't going to keep working. In 2012, Kodak filed for bankruptcy, not because they lacked the innovation, they invented it. They lacked the urgency to act on what the gap was already telling them, because acknowledging it honestly felt more threatening than just continuing on as things were. Now, I want you to notice that Kodak's problem was never information. They had the camera. They had the data. What they were missing was the willingness to actually sit with the contrast between current comfort and where things were realistically heading instead of looking away from it. This is exactly what happens with people, not just companies. When you look honestly at the gap between your life now and the life you actually want, it doesn't feel like clarity at first. It feels like criticism. So most of us soften it or avoid it altogether, the same way Kodak executives looked at a working digital camera and decided not to look too closely at what it meant. But an honest assessment has never been about judgment. In any situation where you're trying to actually help someone move forward, you don't get there by minimizing where they currently stand, out of some idea that it's kinder. You get there by seeing the real picture clearly without flinching and without piling shame on top of it, because shame and clarity are not the same thing, even though they can feel identical in the moment. Clarity says, here's exactly where this is, and here's what's continuing on this path actually costs. That's not an insult. That's only the honest starting point a real plan can be built from. Now here's the part most people avoid, and it's worth naming directly. A lot of us aren't actually avoiding the gap because we don't see it. We're avoiding it because facing it, honestly, means giving up a story we've been quietly telling ourselves. That is, that this isn't really our life yet, and that the real version starts later, once things settle down, once there's more time, once it's a better moment. That story feels comforting. It also means you can keep deferring the gap indefinitely, the same way Kodak kept deferring the future for almost 40 years. I want you to ask yourself something uncomfortable. Is there a part of your current life you've been quietly treating as a rough draft? Something you're tolerating because you've told yourself the real version is still coming? And if you're honest, what evidence do you actually have that it's coming? If nothing about today changes, that's not meant to scare you. It's meant to wake you up the way it should have woken up a room full of executives looking at a working prototype decades before anyone else had one. Now, open your notebook one more time. Go back to the goal you wrote in lesson 1. Write down specifically and honestly exactly where that area of your life stands right now. Real numbers, if there are numbers, real specifics, not vague impressions. Underneath it, write where you genuinely want the same area to be 12 months from now. Now write the harder sentence. If absolutely nothing changes from today forward, in 12 months, this area of my life will most likely look like ... fill in the blank. Don't over exaggerate it and don't soften it either. Just write the honest, realistic continuation of exactly what you're doing right now. Sit with that sentence for a moment, then write one decision, not a whole plan, one decision that you can actually make today that starts closing the smallest piece of that gap. Make the decision and then go act on it before the day is over. That's it for the past month. Complete. You've checked your motivation, found your hidden rules, rewritten your identity, trained your filter, and now face the honest gap between today and the life you actually want, and made one real decision because of it. That's not a small amount of ground to cover in just one day, and I don't want you to rush past it. Sit with what you've built here before you move on. Now, next week is where we're going to start building the practical structure on top of everything you just did, and I'm genuinely glad that you're still here for it. I'll see you there.